Hi, this is Laura Solomon at Oakland, and in this first of a series of videos about how to create a web form in your website kit, we're going to look at the very beginning of how it's done. The first thing to note is that there are actually two options in the administrative menu that say web form. Let's take a look at those and why they're different. So the first one, which might seem like the first place you should go, is content, add content, and then you'll see an option for web form. But this isn't actually where you're going to start. Actually, what this does is after a web form is built, you're enabled to put it onto a page in your website or a book page on your website. So the first thing we need to do is actually build a web form before we can add it to a content type. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to structure, and right under structure there's an option for web forms. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to click web forms under structure, and then we're taken here. And any web forms that you already have in your website kit will be shown here, and they can be filtered if you have a good number of them if you need to search. But the first thing we want to do to create a new web form is we see this blue button called Add Web Form. So we're going to go ahead and click that. Sorry about my autofill. And then the title of the web form. So this could be recommend a good book for me, or it could be anything, but whatever the title of your form is, that is what shows up to the public. So I'm going to go ahead and put test web form in here so that we know this is a test. Now the administrative description is just that. It only shows up to you as the administrator. This does not show up for the visitors. So you can put a note here if you'd like. It's essentially just an internal note to yourself. You're going to ignore category. And then the last option here is open or closed. So by default, when you create a new web form, it's going to be on open because the assumption is that you want the form to be open for anyone to create a new submission for the form. But there may be times when, say, you have a survey, and maybe that survey is only going to be available for a certain amount of time. And so when it's done, when the time is up, you can come back and you can click closed so that no more submissions can be made on that web form. But for the most part, you're going to want to just leave it at open. So we're going to go ahead and click save. And now it says test web form is created, and we have this kind of empty page here with lots of videos. Notice that there is by the way, a watch video link here that you're going to want to take a little time to probably watch. It's going to explain a good deal. Keep in mind that what we're doing here in these Oakland videos is just giving you some foundational information. The web form environment is extremely robust. There is a lot to it, more than I know, and I'd have to go in and learn a good bit myself to know every nook and cranny of the web forms module. So be aware of that this is a very, very big ecosystem with lots of pieces and parts. And so what we're doing here is we're really just showing you some of the basics you're going to need to get started, and you'll be responsible for teaching yourself anything more advanced on your own. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to add an element, because every field in your web form is an element. So let's say that we need a first name field. So we're going to go ahead and click add element. My autofill showing there again. And I want to just quickly scroll through this list. You can see there are a lot of different field types available, way more than we could cover in videos. So what we're going to be looking at really are just the basic types here, and we actually won't even be covering hidden. We're just going to be looking in our series at checkboxes, at text areas, and text fields. So let's start with the most basic of text field. Right here, the most basic elements. We're going to go ahead and click the Add Element button next to that. And then we get this over to the side. And I'm going to move my recording window over a little bit. There we go. Okay, so the title here is the first field that we're presented with, which is a required field when you're creating a web form. And by the way, for just about every field that you need to fill out on any given element, you'll notice there's these little question marks, and if you mouse over them, these are tooltips. So they give you a little bit more information if you're not sure what it is that you're looking at. But in this case, we're going to say, let's just say first name is going to be the name of the field. Now, the allowed number of values is how many things someone can put in there. So people typically have one first name, so we're going to leave that at limited to just one. But there may be times for things where you want people to be able to enter more than one value. For example, let's say you had a reader's advisory form and you wanted people to be able to list maybe 5 titles that they've liked to help the librarian pick out some things for them to read. In that case, you'd still leave it at limited, but now we would change that number to 5. Now, the other thing that's here, let's take that back down to 1, is that the allowed number of values is either limited or unlimited. So you can limit it to a specific number, or there's also unlimited, which doesn't give you a number at all because it's literally unlimited. It's forever. So you're almost never going to use that, but it is there as an option. The next section is about all of the kind of help/description text that you can provide for people when they're filling out a form. So maybe this field requires some additional explanation. You can include a description here, and notice there's a little tooltip. So you can, if you wanted, let's say you need people to capitalize the first letter, you could put that information into the description. The help is actually more like a tooltip. In fact, it's much like this. So it's not the same thing as the description, and it has a title and then it has some help text. But so we can see what this is going to look like at the end. Let's put in, this is the description field, and help title, we'll make the title, and we'll say this is the help text. So we're just basically identifying these so that we'll be able to tell which is which when we see the completed form. And then there's also a more option, and this gives you even more, and it's a hide show widget, kind of like what you're seeing here, where things click open and close. So you have the option to include not just a tooltip, not just the description, but even more text if you need to help people. As far as the title and the description display and the help display, these are basically just telling the web form where to put these things. So you can say that the title of the field comes before the actual input field where people type, or you have these other options. None is not recommended, by the way. If you really don't want something seen by people, I recommend invisible, but not none. The problem with none is that it hides it for everyone, including people with screen readers. That means they can't tell what that field is. So you're almost never going to have a field where you don't tell people what it is anyway. So, but pretend none isn't there. Oops, didn't mean to close that. Field prefix, for example, let's say you had a field where people had to fill in a dollar amount. You could put the $sign in front of the field. Or let's say you had something where you needed a suffix, like maybe, for example, pounds. So you could type, have LBS after the number, and that would be the field suffix. Min length and max length. So how long, what's the minimum length, what's the maximum length? If, let's say, for example, you had a 5-digit zip code field, so maybe it has to be at least 5 numbers, 5 characters, and the same thing would be then for max length for a 5-digit zip code. But you don't have to have anything in the min length, and even though it doesn't say required, you should have something in the max length, because otherwise there's a possibility for someone to do a code injection who has malicious intent. If there's no limit on the number of characters, people can put things in there that they shouldn't. So for a first name, we'll be generous and say 25 characters. The size is how big the field is, and literally the physical size of it, how long it is. If you leave it blank, it will be the default size. I'm just going to leave it blank in this case, but you may want to change it. The placeholder is text that is in the field before anyone actually types in it. This is a very bad idea. I wish this didn't exist. It's from a usability standpoint, placeholder text seems like it's helpful, but in fact, real data shows that in fact it is not. Studies have been done, and people are actually confused oftentimes by placeholder text. So you might think that putting something like put your first name here would be helpful, but in fact it is not. Leave this blank. Autocomplete should be left on in virtually every circumstance because this is something where the user can use stored data in their browser to fill things out. For example, their name, their address, their phone number. Browsers often store that sort of thing, and if you turn it off, that means that they have to manually type in information that's already been saved to the browser and not something that people like to do. Input masks really gives you predefined formats. So for example, you can turn this into lowercase, uppercase. You can format it as a full zip code. You can see phone numbers. Probably the one you'll use the most is the email address because it makes sure that whatever's being entered is formatted correctly. So this is a pretty handy thing for certain types of data. We're going to ignore these 4 checkboxes. You'll almost never use them. We're going to go down to form validation. If this field is required, you're going to go ahead and click it. We're going to say the first name is required. Yes. Now, when you click that, you're going to see that there's this new field that pops up called required message, and it's important that you fill this in. This is the message that will appear to people when they go to submit the form if this field is missing or incorrect in some way. So what I like to say is the first name field is required. Don't say anything like this field is required because that does not necessarily tell people right away or people with screen readers which field is the problem. It's very generic. So you don't want generic messages. Tailor it to the field that's being, the attention is being pulled to. Unique probably won't use too often, but if for some reason, for example, if you needed everybody's first name to be unique and nobody could ever submit a form with the same first name, you could click this, probably won't use that. We're going to ignore the other features here, pattern and counter. Again, if you want to investigate any of these other things, you certainly can, but they go beyond the basics that we're teaching here in this video. Now, at the bottom, you have save and add element. Most of the time, you're going to save and add element because you're not going to have a form with just one field. But just to show you, it doesn't matter really. The only thing is that the save and add element button saves you a step when you go to add the next element. But I'm going to go ahead and just click save. And it's going to do its thing here. And I'm going to move my recording window over a little bit so you can see this a little better. And now we have an element here in our list called first name. And if we go look at our form by clicking the View tab up here, you can see here that we have, there's that description field that remember we typed in. So that's text that appears right underneath the text field in this case. And then we also have help text. There's the title and there's the actual text. So there's the tooltip, and you can see it's required like we told it to be because it's got the little red star by it. Now, if we look at this and go, oh, no, this is, I need to fix something, you can go right back to build in the tab. Here's that first name element, and you can click edit and get right back and make any changes that you want. That's all that we're going to cover in this first video. In the next video, we're going to cover at least a couple more different input types. So I'll see you back for the next video. Thanks.